I want to thank Stephanie Bailey and the Blue Outpost Texas Democrats organization for the work that you all are putting into the most important series of elections of our lifetimes, highlighting these critically important state house races, where for the first time in 20 years we have a chance to win a majority in the state legislature, is critical not only for getting back control of our state government and dismantling the infrastructure of voter suppression and voter intimidation and moving forward on the big things that we want to do for our fellow Texans. But it's also going to help us up ballot, whether they are the congressional races that we want to hold on to Democratic seats or the congressional races where we can flip a Republican seat into Democratic control, or defeating John Cornyn, Donald Trump's single greatest enabler in the United States Senate, and sending in his place MJ Hagar, who will represent us in a way that we can be proud of. Or this, Texas has a chance for the first time in 44 years, since 1976, to send our electoral college votes to the Democratic nominee, Joe Biden, and defeat Donald Trump, and thereby turn the page on Trumpism and begin the next necessary new chapter for this state and for our country. Texas has the chance to come through big time for America. And that fight is being led by these courageous state house candidates who are doing everything they can at this critical moment of truth. Thank you for highlighting them. Thank you for elevating the importance of these races. And thank you for the work that you're doing between now and November 3rd.
Well, hi, everyone. It's Mike Collier here. Many of you, we know each other. I ran for Texas Lieutenant Governor, had a chance to campaign with my good friend Beto O'Rourke. Always good to see him. Always good to see you. I'll say this about Beto. You saw on his shirt, stay tuned. I can attest that he's every bit as sincere as he appears. Just an absolutely wonderful person and a great leader. And welcome tonight to the Blue Outpost Texas Democrat Candidate Forum. We have three wonderful candidates. This is the third in a series. Three wonderful women candidates. You know, there are an awful lot of people around the country that are talking about the good things that are happening in Texas and Texas politics and the ascendancy of the Democratic Party. Do not underestimate the power and the impact of the fine women that we have running for office. A lot of them. You'll meet three of them tonight. Just terrific candidates. I've gotten to know them, and I just couldn't be more proud to be associated with them. As Beto said, this is such an important election cycle. I'm not on the ballot, but I'm in the fight. And for those of us that have been working on turning Texas blue, for me going on 7 years, we've had our shoulder to this wheel and it's turning, and that's wonderful. And it's going to keep turning, and we will accomplish our objective. And when we do this time, which I believe we will, and control the Texas House, then all these good things that we've been fighting for begin to happen. Permanent funding for public education. We're going to deal with criminal justice. We're going to deal with healthcare and expanding Medicaid. And I mean, a lot of people really need this. Gerrymandering. We're going to solve that problem. And when Texas solves the gerrymandering problem, the rest of the country will follow. So these are very, very exciting times. And I'm just so happy to be involved. 29 days until early voting, roughly 50 days till election. We have a lot of work to do. Okay, let's get started. What I want to do is first recognize our sponsors. So I'll read them out. In advance, thank you so much. Here we go. Our sponsors for tonight's program. The 312th Family District Court Judge, Clinton Chip Wells. 270th Civil District Court Judge, Deidre Davis. Club sponsors, the Blue Bayou Democrats, Meyerland Area Democrats, Texas Democratic Women Harris County Chapter, Houston Stonewall Young Democrats, Southwest Democrats, Cy-Fair Area Democrats, Humble Area Democrats, Democratic Club of the Woodlands, the Energy and Environmental Democrats, Road Women, Cypress Tomball Democrats, Kingwood Area Democrats, that's where I am, here in Kingwood, Spring Democratic Club. Now I'd like to recognize our royal sponsors, former County Clerk Diane Troutman, thank you, Diane, Carl Jones, and Humble Area Democrat President John Carter. Thank you so much, John. Our Sapphire sponsors, Texas Senate District 3, Committeewoman Shirley Layton. That's a hard-working woman, I can tell you. Texas Senate District 7 Democrats, Attorney Mark Whitehead. Thank you, Mark. And our organizational sponsors, Powered by the People, Harris County Democratic Party, Flip the Texas House, Sisters United Alliance doing great work, Swing Left Texas, Indivisible Houston, and Blue Action Democrats. So this is an exciting time. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over in just a minute. But one of the things we're trying to do, in addition to have you meet these wonderful candidates and get in this game and get in this fight, we're raising money for them. You recognize that getting our message out, and we have such a winning message, but getting it out is the key, and it takes money. So I hope you have your credit card ready, and I hope you help these fabulous candidates. All right. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over now to your hosts and moderators, my good friends, Jaime Rodriguez and Carly Moser.
Howdy, Mike. Once again, a fabulous job getting everybody excited. Thank you for hosting these series of events.
I couldn't be happier.
It's great. And it's a testament to the way Texas is united in that the candidates from one cycle stick around and help each other for the next cycle, even when they're not on the ballot. So
we're in this until we win it.
And thanks for recognizing the power of women, especially this year. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right, Mike, we'll see you Tuesday night. And thanks.
See you then.
Yep.
Okay.
So, Carly, are you ready for a great show?
I am excited. We've had so many great candidates so far, and this night will prove to be no different. And I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, we have 3 great candidates tonight from all across Texas. And, you know, that's part of the idea of the show is to mix it up every night and have candidates from all across Texas so that Texans everywhere have a reason to show up every night. And what better reason than to try to flip 17 state house districts?
That's right.
And, you know, we only need 9 to take back the House. So that's an incredible number that we have 17 ready to go and we only need 9.
That's right. We're very excited. We're going to use this opportunity tonight to introduce you to 3 fantastic candidates, but also to ask you to donate to these candidates, to share the video afterwards and during, and to ask questions in the live comments during the feed so that during our last half hour, your questions and your concerns will be heard. We will also ask you to donate your time. So money is not everything, though it is important. Your time and your efforts on the ground are what's important. And all of these candidates have wonderful opportunities for you to help them get to the State House. We're so excited to have you and have them join us. So are you ready?
Yeah, so why don't we have you introduce all 3 of the candidates and then we'll get started.
All right. So first up, we have Akila Basie from HD 138. We have Elizabeth Beck from HD 97. And last but not least, of course, Sharon Hirsch from HD 66. Hey, y'all.
Hi, Carly. Hi, Jaime.
Welcome, welcome. Great. So let me explain to you the format of tonight's show for those of you who haven't seen the show before. It's pretty straightforward. We're going to start with a 1-minute introduction from each of you. And then we're going to do a lightning round. And these are meant to be just 1 or 2 word answered questions. The idea is to get to know you fast so that the audience gets to know who they're talking to. And then we're going to go to some philosophical questions. And the philosophical questions are the kinds of questions that any candidate running for any office anywhere in America should be able to talk about. The kind of things that you should be thinking about if you're a candidate. You know, a lot of times we elect candidates based on one issue that's an issue of the day. It's something important at that moment. And then 4 or 6 years later, we realize that we have a candidate that we don't really agree with on a lot of things because we didn't really know how they got to derive their answers or derive their decisions. We just knew that they were with us on one issue when we supported them. So we like to ask some philosophical questions up front so that the audience gets to know you and how you think. Again, your answers aren't as important as how you got to your answers. That's what people are really listening for. How do you think and how do you process information? After that, we will go to issues of the day. We have a lot of issues to talk about that are important to Texans and Americans everywhere. And then at the end of that hour, we're going to have you speak to your district specifically and tell us a little bit about what are the struggles, the opportunities in your district. After that, at 8 o'clock, we'll let the audience ask you questions. We have a team of people behind the scenes who are watching Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and they are feeding the questions to Carly and I. And then from 8 to 8:30, we'll be asking you those questions from the audience. So if y'all are good with the format, we'll get ready. And we will start. Carly?
Great. We're going to do a 1-minute introduction from each of our candidates. We're going to do all of our questions and answers kind of in a round robin style. So because I started with Akilah into bringing you in, we will start with Elizabeth here. And if you'll give us your introduction in a minute. Elizabeth.
Sure. My name is Elizabeth Beck. I am your next state representative for House District 97. This is home for me. It's where I grew up. I'm a mother. I'm an Iraq War veteran. I'm a lawyer, and I'm a proud community leader here in House District 97. And I am running to replace an incumbent that no longer carries the values of this district, and to be our district's voice in the fight in Austin when we have to make those really tough decisions that the legislature is going to have to make this upcoming session. So I'm really excited to be here. Elizabeth Beck. You can learn more about me at elizabethfortexas.com.
Oh, fantastic. We're so happy to have you here, Elizabeth. Thank you so much. Next, we will bring up Sharon Hirsch for her 1 minute. Sharon?
Hi, everybody. I'm Sharon Hirsch. I'm running for the Texas House of Representatives for District 66. We're up here in Collin County, and I am running to represent West Plano and North Dallas. I am a 24-year resident of the district, raised my 4 children here, mom to 2 grandkids who are now entering our public schools. And in 2018, I came within 391 votes of flipping the seat. I ran primarily because I am a public school champion. I want our district deserves someone who cares deeply about our public schools. And that will be a primary concern of mine in the legislature. We have not elected a Democrat here in Collin County since I believe about 1988. So it's long past time to break single party rule and bring some diverse representation to our county and our district. And you can learn more about me at Sharon4Texas.com. It's Sharon, the number 4TX.com. And I'm really looking forward to the evening.
Thank you so much, Sharon. That was fantastic. And last and certainly not least, from our own area here in the Houston area, Akilah Basie for 138. Hey, Akilah.
Hey, thank you guys so much for having me. My name is Akilah Basie, and I'm your Democratic nominee for Texas House District 138. This is a seat we missed flipping by 47 votes. We got out in the primary and came very close to having to runoff, but in the runoff, we came out with 80% of the vote, and that was because we shared a very simple message, and that was a message that was for the people, about the people, and they came from someone like me who works for the people. I was born here in House District 138, and I have grown up in the Northwest area. I came back home, and I would start off as a attorney at the DA's office, started doing defense and discrimination work. In the community, I serve as a pro bono attorney for children seeking asylum and those who were victims of Hurricane Harvey. I've done mentor work as well as teaching ESL in the district and as a Sunday school teacher. And I am running for this seat because I want to make sure that we are no longer just fighting for each other and our friends and our family and our community on a case-by-case basis, but for everyone holistically to make sure that we get that change that we need so that we can actually see the change that everybody is really fighting for and what the majority of our district and the majority of our community want to see.
Thank you so much, Akilah. That was great. We clearly have 3 incredibly impressive candidates here tonight. I'm very excited for our conversation. I'll turn it over to Jaime for our next portion of our show.
So we're going to start the lightning round. And again, this is not meant to be anything more than just a getting to know you session. It's a quick way for the audience to figure out who you are. So Sharon, we'll start with you. And the first one is just tell us the name of your opponent so that we get to kind of know who it is we're supposed to be booing at.
Matt Shaheen.
Boo. Akilah?
Akilah?
Oh, I don't like this. I don't like to do that, but
We won't do.
My opponent's name is Lacey Hull.
Okay, and Elizabeth?
Craig Goldman.
Never be afraid to name your opponent because actually the reality, I know it goes counter to what you kind of hear all the time as a candidate, but as a professional campaign person, I can tell you that name your opponent, let people hear who your difference is so just keep that in mind. Carly, next question.
All right, our next lightning round question is, I know that y'all have actually probably all answered this question, but we will go ahead and ask it anyways. Akilah, how long have you lived in your district?
I have lived here off and on, I'd say probably for a decade.
Elizabeth?
I have lived here my entire life.
And Sharon?
Resident of HD 66 for 24 years.
So, Elizabeth, have you ever been elected to office before as an adult?
No, this will be my first elected position.
Okay, and Sharon?
I'm going to say yes. I was elected to the State Democratic Executive Committee in 2016.
Oh, wow. Okay, and Akila?
No.
I know SDEC is it is a thing, but I'm glad to see that your talents are going to be elevated to another place.
Exactly.
Make some good legislative decisions, I hope. Okay, we will move to. I like this question a lot. I ask it every night. Next spring, when President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris show up to your district, where will you take them to lunch? We will start with Elizabeth.
I would probably take them to the Italian place that was my first job, and it's here in my district.
Nice. What's the name of the place?
It's called Prima Pasta.
Very good. Sharon?
Too many good places in Plano. Too many good places. Maybe I'll just take him down the road to Chewy's.
I love that. Akila?
I don't know the name, but it's this little faux spot off of Gessner and Westview. That's where we're going.
Love it.
Good. Okay, Sharon. So, one of the biggest differences between us and them, and you hate to have an us and them situation, but right now there's one party that doesn't seem to believe in reading or facts or wanting to study things. Let's talk about the Democrats. What are you reading right now that you want to recommend to the audience?
I'm actually reading a book called Rodham by Curtis Sittenfeld, and it's a what if Hillary hadn't married Bill. And I think I'm going to be very happy with the ending, and we would have all been happy if it were the ending in 2016.
Okay, Akila?
I am reading for colored girls who have considered politics.
Wow.
Good.
And Elizabeth?
I am reading The Soul of Money.
Oh, interesting. Who's that one?
Deep thinkers over here. I really like that.
I'd have to look. I don't remember the author.
I
So
really like that.
The Soul of Money, is that what you called it? Wow. Okay. Carly?
We are certainly in that part of our reading comprehension. We need to think about the soul of this nation. This is why we have fantastic women running for office like you. A reminder to all of that are watching, please donate at least $17 to each of these candidates. We're asking for $17 in honor of the 17 most flippable House seats in the state of Texas, which these three young women are running to take their experience, their talents, and their love of our community to the State House. So please make sure you give them at least $17. Give them an hour of your time. Give them 2 hours of your time. Give them your talents in phone banking and text banking and writing postcards. Every opportunity, they all have them on their websites. Their websites will scroll across the screen as we go on tonight. So make sure you catch that and make sure you donate that money. Okay, we are going to move on to the next part of our show, I believe, Jaime.
Yeah.
So are we going to start with philosophical questions, or are we going to do the state questions? Philosophical?
Yeah. So
Okay.
philosophical questions are up next. So I think Elizabeth, I'm sorry, Akila, you're up next to start. So, Akila,
The first question we have for the philosophical questions is considering what's going on right now in journalism and online activism, what do you feel like are the professional responsibilities of journalists and online activists in spreading information out?
Well, I think activists and journalists have two different jobs. So I think the job of the journalist is to report the facts and in particular places, report their opinions and share that information, get in there and do the hard work, the nitty gritty, ask those hard questions and do that as well. I think the job of activists is to push forward the agenda of the people. The job of the activist is to bring light to those people who are typically disenfranchised, whose voices are typically drowned out by the ruling class, and to do the work there. So I think they differ, but those are, I think, where those jobs land.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
I'm going to echo what Akila said. I think that journalists are there to investigate and provide us with a fair representation of the facts and analysis of those facts. And I think that activists are there to be advocates for their cause, whichever cause that may be. And so their job is to, push forward their goals. And so that's not always the same type of information that comes out.
Thank you. Sharon?
Yeah, journalism must be honest, integrity, asking those hard questions, reporting the truth. I mean, we need to know the truth. And then I think for activists, it's inspiring and motivating and, delivering that passion for whatever it is that they're fighting for.
So just to let you know, we've actually allotted enough time for you to have 1 minute to answer each of these questions. And I've got a stopwatch here. So if you start to go long, you'll see me kind of throw the stopwatch up in the air and we'll just all respect the time. But just so you have an understanding of how much time you have to talk. So Elizabeth, the next question is to you, a philosophical question. How do you know when it's time to raise taxes, lower taxes, keep taxes the same? And we know that there are a lot of different types of taxes. So what's on your mind when you're thinking about taxes?
I think that the goal should always be to not raise taxes and increase the tax burden on our citizens across the state. I think that, and likewise, we have to make sure that whatever we're doing as lean as possible. And if that means surplus, right, at the state level or at the city, county level, there should be an analysis on what you can give back to residents, whether that be in the form of property tax relief or, other excise taxes. So I think that it all relates to the budget, right? You want to do the most you can with what you've got without having to raise it. And I don't think that we're going to find ourselves in a situation where we're going to have an abundance in this next legislative session. So I don't think that, we'll see tax rates decrease. And of course, that's in large part left up to taxing entities outside of, outside of the state level.
Okay, Sharon?
Yeah, for me, it's all about being fiscally responsible and making sure that you are, you have the money for your priorities. So whether I'm thinking about my family or when I was working on a campus and responsible for that budget, it was establishing priorities and then making sure that you had the funding to take care of those priorities. I also believe strongly in long-term planning, looking ahead, making sure that you're able to allocate those resources appropriately. I think we do too much short-term thinking. These election cycles come so quickly and folks make decisions based on their next election rather than what's the most prudent. And I think we have to be conscious of shared responsibilities and making sure that we are not putting the tax burden on certain constituencies while we're giving exemptions to others. So fiscally responsible, that's my motto.
Good. Akila?
I think we look at raising taxes after we ensure that everyone is paying their fair share of taxes. Currently, there are so many loopholes for the 1% in Texas, and we need to make sure that everyone is paying their fair share. Once we make sure that everyone is already paying their fair share, and then we see where we are as far as the deficit goes, then we may consider raising taxes. But I don't think we need to raise taxes on those of us who are typically already paying taxes, the middle class, the majority of Texans, until we ensure that those who are not paying their taxes are paying their fair portion.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, guys. Those are all great questions. Now that we've talked about the theory of when to raise or lower taxes or leave them alone, I would like to ask you all how you prioritize the services that need that funding that we may need to raise, lower taxes, whatever. How do you prioritize those issues? Sharon, we'll start with you on this one.
Well, the majority of the budget in Texas is for education and healthcare. And at least in the education piece, that's a constitutional mandate. So we make sure that that's a priority. And for me, children are our future, and children should be a priority. We also need to take care of those less fortunate than us. I think we are not a great state if we don't take care of everybody. And so those two priorities, children and healthcare, I think will always be number one for me.
Thank you. Akilah?
I think that we need to allocate where it is that we see the need at the time. Kind of what was said earlier is that a lot of times we might vote people in based off of one issue or the issue of the day. So we need to make sure that we are covering what are going to be our foundational issues, which will be healthcare and education, but then see where we're going to allocate them based off of what is the issue of the day. What is the group that needs the taxes then? What is the group that needs the resources, the revenue then? That's where we determine it. There's not one particular answer that I can give you for any area until we look at everything fully and holistically.
Seems like a big undertaking, but I know you ladies are prepared. Elizabeth?
I think it's first and foremost, we have to make sure that we have our priorities right in the legislature. And so we have to look at what those essential services that the state should be providing to Texans are, and make sure that that is where our funding is going, and that we're not diverting it for to fund corporate charter schools or for to assist the federal government in tasks that are solely theirs. We have to make sure that we are taking care of state issues first and foremost, and then after that, with whatever's left over, then we can start spreading that around.
Great. Thank you, ladies.
Okay, so that's the end of the philosophical questions portion of our event. And I'll remind the audience that you too can be asking your questions. Come to us on Facebook at Blue Outpost TX, Blue Outpost Texas. Find us on YouTube, Twitter, the same handles. Ask your questions all along if something you hear stirs your opinion. And at 8 o'clock, we are going to be asking these candidates those questions. So, and of course, they'll live online. And candidates, we urge you after the show to go back and check out what kind of questions we didn't get to have time to choose, tonight to ask y'all. Audience loves to hear y'all's opinion later. So, okay, let's move on to some issues of the day, because we do want to ask you about the issues of the day. And Akilah, we'll start with you. The number one polling issue nationwide consistently in the last year has been healthcare. So let us ask you the question this way. As a Texas legislator, how do you provide the most health care to the most people given our resources?
Well, I think what we have to look at is that we have the resources. We simply need to accept the resources. And we accept those resources by giving a vote to the people to determine what it is we're going to do and what resources we're going to accept, and take the politics out of healthcare. And we look at the people who need healthcare. So that is where we start, is by giving a vote to the people about expanding our healthcare and not turning back the billions of dollars that we give back that we've already paid in taxes every year to the federal government.
Elizabeth?
I'm going to echo Akilah. We for a little over $5 billion, right? We get we can draw down $65 billion from the federal government. And that is $34 billion of that is money that Texans are already paying that are going to other states. And so it's time that we keep Texas dollars in Texas, and we do that by accepting those federal Medicaid funds to expand healthcare. It's a no-brainer, and it's estimated to reduce the $5.5 billion we have annually in uncompensated emergency room bills. And so the economic impact of that, it's not just a moral imperative to ensure that our neediest Texans have access to high quality health care, but if there is an economic benefit to Texas that we are in desperate need of securing.
And Sharon?
This is an ideological battle that has really caused a lot of Texans to suffer. So it's both an economic boom for Texas to accept the Medicaid dollars. We have examples from 37 other states who have already done so. None of them are saying that they made a mistake. So we have good examples on why we should be expanding Medicaid. And then we also had the opportunity, I think, last cycle to extend postpartum care for moms on Medicaid for the full year, which doctors recommend, and that didn't pass. And we also had the opportunity to keep children on continuous care for a full year rather than having their parents apply over and over and over again. So we can streamline our systems and actually save money. We can help the people that need it most. And the more people who are covered by healthcare, the lower the costs are for everyone else. So that's just the first stage in what we can do to improve healthcare for Texans.
You ladies are continuing to impress me with every answer that you all give. Make sure to donate $17 and at least an hour of your time a week. I would say an hour of your time a day at the very least. Make some phone calls. It's scary. Nobody wants to do it. I got it. But it will help these women get elected. If you send those texts, make a plan to vote with 5 of your friends. Do everything you can to make sure these women get elected, and make sure to donate to their websites, which will all be screening across the screen, and ask us your questions that we can ask them at 8:00, which is only a short half hour away from now. So, okay, we're going to move on to next issue questions. And we do live in the state of Texas, ladies. So that means that guns are forefront in many, many, many voters' minds. So I would like to know, what does comprehensive gun reform policy look like to you? Elizabeth, we'll start with you.
Sure. So as a military veteran, I have a very unique understanding of the power behind a bullet. And we have got to make sure that we are keeping our communities safe. And we do that through some common sense gun legislation. Mm-hmm. We're not talking about taking your weapons away. We're talking about making sure that our children are safe, that our communities are safe. And we do that by ensuring that terrorists, known terrorists or people with severe mental health issues or known domestic abusers don't have easy access to firearms. We do that by ensuring that every Texan that purchases a weapon undergoes the exact same background check. So that helps us keep those guns out of the hands of people that shouldn't have them.
Fantastic. Sharon?
Yeah, we already know that the majority of Texans support universal background checks, and they also support red flag laws. And both of those are known to help save lives. So those are the first two things. People want those, and we should be able to pass them. Again, there's these ideological battles that we're waging that do not reflect the values of Texans. Safe storage laws, again, making sure that we protect our children first and foremost.
Thank you. Akilah?
Well, I'm going to go kind of with personal experience, like Elizabeth said, is that as a former prosecutor, I see what guns do in the wrong hands. And so I think that once people, and I think it's going to be something hard for many people to swallow if they actually saw what guns do to the human body. And so I think what we need to make sure that we're doing, though, is also, I am a gun owner. I am previously when I was a prosecutor, I had a CHL as well. So I am very, I believe that, people do have that right, and we, respect the Second Amendment. But with that, with each right comes responsibility. And that's where we need to look at, we're looking at common sense gun reform. And that includes background checks. That includes registration. That includes very simple things that we do with things like our cars every single year. That includes also when people are buying guns, that if you sell a gun to someone, that you are making sure that they register that gun as well. And that they're able to have it. People don't understand that a lot of times in our criminal justice system, we will see guns in the hands of someone who was not allowed to have them. And however, that gun is not stolen, and that gun was purchased technically legally. They just are possessing it illegally. So we need to make sure that we're closing that as well.
I love that you each have a personal connection to what these issues are. Just as a woman, I just have to say that I feel like that connects to me. So it connects me to each of you, and I just cannot wait to do work for you guys. It's very, very excited. Okay, Jaime.
Carly loves to comment after these questions, and it's good.
How can you not with these impressive women? Seriously, how can you not?
It gives you a good insight into the voter. It tells you what regular people are thinking. So a lot of times candidates don't get to hear feedback right away like that. It's great. Sharon, let's ask you another big buzzword question. And I'm going to give each of you candidates a minute and a half to answer this one because this is a big one. We're seeing it all over the country. And the buzzword is social justice reform. Mm-hmm. Tell us, what does social justice reform look like to you? Mm-hmm. Sharon?
Yeah, I think, this is not an easy fix, and thanks for the minute and a half, but I've been thinking a lot about this, and I think, first of all, we need a national conversation on racism and on systemic racism, how this has infected every part of our being, right? Whether it's healthcare, education, the economy. We need to have a national conversation on that. We need to have federal and state legislation that addresses police violence and specific tactics. It needs to address accountability, and it needs to address over-policing. And then I think on the community level, we need to get together as communities. Every community is different, but we need to make sure we have a broad coalition of community members, the folks that are part of the police department, the people that collect the taxes and allocate the resources. And all of those entities need to come together and say, what does this look like in our community? I think Chief Brown made a clarion call in 2016 after the tragic shooting of the police officers. And he said, when you underfund healthcare, when you underfund mental health, when you underfund drug addiction and education, these become problems that, filter down into policing. And then I think all of us as individuals need to take a real time to reflect on our own personal biases and to see how we can become better people. It's a big problem, and some things you can fix legislatively, some things you have to fix in your own heart.
I know it's a big issue. Akilah, 1.5 minutes.
Well, I think that we start with social justice reform by reforming our educational system, by reforming our healthcare system, by reforming our employment system. Mm-hmm. Like I said, as a former prosecutor, current defense attorney, what I see with our social justice systems is that they're all birthed from these issues that we see within our communities. Mm-hmm. And so that is where we start. There is no particular you cannot reform social justice without reforming all of those all those systems. It is a holistic change that we have to make, and I think that that's what's extremely, extremely important. And that's where the conversation has to start. When I say that I'm for social justice, say, what does that mean? That means I'm for education. That means I'm for fair employment. Mm-hmm. That means I'm for making sure that people are not worried about their jobs. That means I'm for making sure that families get the health care that they need. That's what I mean when I say that I'm for social justice reform. And that's how I think we work on alleviating it and fighting for true reform.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, I think we are at a point in our nation where we are having a real reckoning with our past and our current situation. Mm-hmm. And that is not an easy reckoning to have, because many people, myself included, folks that look like me, have to do a lot of digging deep, right? And looking at what we have done and what systems are in place that have allowed us to prosper while keeping other members of our community down. And so I talk about how, we are going to have to make sure that in this next legislative session, when we are making those tough decisions on how we boost our economy and how we build back, that we do so in a way to make sure that every Texan has the opportunity to succeed within that system. And so we have to be very cognizant of what we're doing and how we're funding it. And Akilah was absolutely correct when she said the best avenue to address social justice that's not in our heart, but in our communities, is the way we prioritize funding. And that is through our public education. That is through our communities, making sure that we are investing in the communities that need the most investment, and that every Texan has the opportunity to succeed.
Fantastic. Don't forget, $17 to each of these candidates. Sign up for an hour of your time this week, next week. We have 30 days, 29 days until early voting. Can you believe it? October 13th is right around the corner, Texas, and these women need your support, your money, your time, your social media shares, do it all. Okay, we are going to just make a little point on what Elizabeth and Akilah were saying in regards to social justice reforms. When we talk about education, there's a million questions we could ask, right? There's a million things we all want to address. What is the difference between charter schools? Talk about teacher certification, talk about funding for higher education, the Robin Hood law, all of these things. But that's too many questions. So I'm going to ask you in 1 minute, how are you going to solve education in Texas? Akilah, you first.
Oh, okay. Me first.
Yeah, Robin.
You know, but honestly, I think that it really starts with two things. And that is, one, we're going to solve education by fully funding education. That is number one. And the second way we're going to solve it is by giving back teachers autonomy in their classrooms on how they are teaching and how they are handling their students in their classrooms. No one knows those students better than those teachers, and we cannot hold them to the same standard we can use like what we use with standardized testing. So we need to give teachers back that autonomy to teach those students how they need to be taught. We need to make sure that we're funding and supporting them in those classrooms as well financially.
That's great, Elizabeth.
You know, I'm going to agree with Akilah on this one, right? We have to make sure that the state is paying its fair share of funding so that the taxpayers, the property owners are no longer saddled, you know, with that burden. And we have to remove the red tape that prevents our public education system from innovating. You know, we hear a lot of buzz about charter schools and what they're able to do and the innovation and success, but it's because they're not held to the same strict standards, the one size fits all pegs that our school districts are required to adhere to. And so I think by removing that and allowing that innovation and allowing, you know, teachers and school districts to do what's best for their communities, giving them back that local control, that's when we will see student outcomes improve. And that is the goal of our public education system, is to improve our outcomes so that our next generation of Texans can go forth and prosper.
Thank you. Sharon?
Well, this is my issue, so 1 minute just isn't enough. But I think, you know, I'll just say COVID-19 has certainly proved the value in so many ways of our public schools. I heard a comment of some mom that said, "Oh, now I know you were lying when you said my kid does everything they're supposed to do. You know, they're the best, whatever, because I can't get them to do that." Right. So we know how important education is. So we have to stop undervaluing and undermining the profession so that we get more young students who are willing to go into teaching as a profession. So I think that's super important. And we've also seen how we've built our economy around the fact that kids go to school every day. Because when moms and dads, you know, were at home and the kids were at home and then they were trying to work, it became very complicated. So I have a million things I could say on this issue to cover all sorts of things, because this is the business my family has been in for decades. But let's make sure we elevate the profession again and get really strong folks in there to teach our children.
Fantastic.
Okay, so to change the topics a little bit, let's talk about something that's uniquely Texan. And I know we have a lot of audience from around the country watching this, so this is a interesting topic for you. In 2017, the Houston area and East Texas experienced one of the largest rain events in American history, Hurricane Harvey. And when that happened, the governor, Greg Abbott, decided not to release funds from something called the Rainy Day Fund. In Texas, we have something called the Rainy Day Fund. Those funds were not released during one of the worst rain events in American history. Elizabeth, tell us what the Rainy Day Fund is for.
So, you know, I like to say it's raining, it's snoring, or it's pouring, and Austin is snoring, right? Like, we have this money that we can use in times of emergencies that is set up in a way that that it comes from, in large part, our oil and gas industry, right? It's a highly volatile industry. And so in a very wise decision, let's bank that in a separate pot so that we're not crippled when that goes boom or bust, as we know it does. And so, like, we have it, let's use it when we need it. And when Texans are struggling, when they're suffering, when we have a disaster, say like, a hurricane, or I don't know, a global pandemic that is, seeing thousands and thousands of Texans lose their jobs and their homes and their, ways of life, or parents struggling to teach at home, that's when that rainy day fund comes in to make sure that Texans have the umbrella that they need to stay dry.
Sharon, what's the rainy day fund for?
Yeah, there's no real rules, right? I mean, we've used it to plug holes in education funding. We've used it to plug holes in Medicaid, other budget shortfalls, and it's become an ideological battle too. Depending on who's in power. We have the largest rainy day fund, or one of the largest funds in the nation. So we certainly should have prioritized it for the hurricane relief, but we don't want to depend on that to take care of our consistent obligations. So yes, emergency funding, I believe we'll probably be using it in this next session to shore up the budget as well. But definitely for Harvey, we should have used it. And but just an over reliance on that to plug holes in the budget, I think is the wrong way to go.
Akilah?
I totally agree with both Elizabeth and Sharon. I think that when we're looking at the rainy day fund, we have to understand that it is discretionary spending, it's discretionary money. But I also think when we need to use it. I mean, will a time like Hurricane Harvey a time to use it? I absolutely think so. The time during a global pandemic, when we see so many Texans losing their lives and jobs, and being faced with evictions, is that a time to use it? I think so. So I think it kind of goes back to your first question. We're talking about, what do you use to fund tax surpluses with, or what are the issues of the day? I think that's what we look at to see how we use the rainy day fund and when we use it, if we need to use it as well.
Thank you so much. Again, $17 an hour of your time, some texting, some phone banking, some postcard writing. Do it all for these ladies. They clearly are going to be the best conspirators in the Texas House together. They will take care of all these wonderful, crazy issues that we Texans have to deal with every day. We have not yet gotten to this question yet in our series of forums, and I would like to bring it up to you, ladies, because we've kind of addressed it a little bit. When we think about oil, when we think about energy, we often think about us being the energy corridor down here. We have a lot of that, but it's generally thought of like in terms of oil, right? Oil and gas. And so we want to know, we're so rich in other natural resources here. How do you propose that we grow the alternative energy sector here in Texas? And we will start with Sharon.
Yeah, I mean, I think Texas will always be an energy state, whether it's what we're extracting out of the ground or what we're taking from the wind and the sun. So I think the key thing here is who's going to be the most innovative and creative as we transition from one source of energy to another. We're going to have cars that run on gasoline on the roads for a long, long, long time. So the oil and gas industry is not going away, but I think the critical part is how it transitions. So our number one resource are our people. So how are we going to ready the workforce to either transition from one energy business to another, or people to work in emerging energy industries?
Thank you. Akilah?
I think that what Sharon said is right. I think that we're looking at using that energy by using that wide open space that we have in West Texas area. I think that that's something that can truly we can be innovative about and create a more sustainable energy source that's better for our environment and our climate as well.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
I think that as we transition from one energy source to the next, we have to make sure we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? We know that it is such a driver for the Texas economy, which means that it's a driver for the, Texans, right? It's how they earn their living. And so we have to make sure that during that transition, right, that it's not a slash and burn type situation, that we make sure that we are bringing the people with us as we move. And I think that one of the things that's really important to encourage that transition is to make sure that all energy producers are on equal footing with the state. Meaning that, you know, if the breaks that one industry gets should be universal for all incentives, you know, all industries and incentives, to make sure that we're not over prioritizing one type of energy or another, that they can all grow and let innovation and the market take over.
Thank you, ladies, especially with all the fires happening on the West Coast. I really feel like we need to address alternative energy as soon as we can. It's something we really need to take care of. So I appreciate all your answers. Jaime?
Yeah, so along those same lines, let me give a little perspective to those people who are not from Texas watching the show tonight. From the western part of Texas to the eastern part of Texas is about a 20-hour drive. And from the northernmost part of the Panhandle to the southernmost tip of Texas, it's about a 22-hour drive. Just to show you the scope and the size of Texas. If you look at the distance between Houston and Dallas, it's roughly the same distance from Washington, D.C. to New York City. And so one of the things that's very interesting is we don't have a rail system that connects the major cities in Texas. Akilah, what do you think about that, and where should we be headed in that direction?
Well, I think we kind of, I don't know how to make this super elaborate, but I think we need one. You know, I think that we need to start with where we see a lot of traffic between our major cities. That's going to be Houston and Dallas. I think that is something that needs to happen immediately. I think growing our infrastructure and using the funding that we see from taxes with gases and our tollways should go to developing better transit and more green and climate friendly transit as well.
Elizabeth?
So you've got a former transportation planner here with you tonight. I don't know if any of you knew that, right? So this is a real passion of mine, and we have got to make sure that we are not being left behind the future of transportation, and that is without question transit. Texas population is growing exponentially, and what we know is that we will not build enough road capacity. We cannot build enough capacity for those Texans coming to drive on roads. We have got to make sure that we are investing in transit, both at the local, city level, and then those bigger projects like the, connecting Dallas to Houston and Houston to Austin and so forth, so that we can move about the state in an effective way, and in a way that that helps reduce the impact on our environment.
And Sharon?
Yeah, it's an investment we can't afford not to make. I mean, we're never going to pave our way out of the problem. I'm all about getting as many cars off the road as possible, whether that's for the environment, whether it's for public safety, etc. But we have the project, the Dallas to Houston project. That's a private project. We need to invest public money in transit, and people want it. Here you have the taxpayers saying you want transportation change, and we're just not doing it. So I think it needs to be prioritized.
It'd be so great for all of you ladies to be able to take the light rail to work.
Yes.
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 I'm just saying. I work in entertainment, and there's a studio here, but there's also a studio in Dallas. So I regularly make that drive up there, and Texas is pretty and all, but it takes a while. It takes a while, and who wants to stop in the middle of a pandemic right now? It's all of that is. You all seem very ready to take the wheel. No,
or not take the wheel.
Not take the wheel.
Or not. Maybe. I appreciate it. Again, go to Blue Outpost TX to find us. But most importantly, please go to each of these ladies' websites. Donate $17. Donate time. Donate just your word of mouth. That your endorsement of these women is just as important as anybody else's endorsement. Your vote matters, and your family may listen to you when you say, hey, Akilah, Sharon, Elizabeth, these are the women we're voting for in my district. Please, please, please. So please do that. We do have one last issues question, I think.
Yeah, let's go straight to
We're getting close. You're all so wonderful. So we're going to do 2 minutes each to talk about, or do we want to do a minute, Jaime?
Go ahead.
2 minutes each to talk about the most important issues in your district, whatever it is that you would like to speak on. We would like to give you this opportunity now. So we will start with Jaime. Who should we start with? Elizabeth?
Sure. So, we all talk about healthcare being an important issue, and that is an issue that is important across the state. But here in House District 97, in addition to making sure that we have access to healthcare, education is incredibly important to this district. And it is even more so important now that education has been brought into our homes. Our largest school district in House District 97 is currently virtual only. And we have seen the impact that has played on families. And so, public education is at the forefront of what we need to address. And we have to fund it because we need to make sure that our schools have the ability to be deft when it comes to addressing, emergencies or crises, or even just the everyday needs of their students. And so public education is so incredibly important, and that cannot be done, or we cannot have that ability unless we stop the state interference with local elected officials. And so that is something that I hear over and over again in the district about cities, counties, school districts, ability to have local control and make decisions that are best for them, not try to conform and bend to a decision based, that is good for, say, Houston or, Midland, Odessa, that they have the ability to make those decisions, and that the state must stop this assault on our local elected officials.
Elizabeth, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Sharon, 2 minutes to you.
Very good. Well, House District 66 is a fantastic place to be. 65% of the adults in our district have a bachelor's degree or higher. So education is incredibly important to our community. We have a stellar system of public schools that have been underfunded for too long. And I'm looking forward to be an education advocate in Austin. We're also home to 4 major hospitals. So healthcare reform would definitely be a priority for our district. And we're home to countless numbers of corporate and regional headquarters. So economic issues, healthcare, and education, I think, are at the forefront. And local control, as Elizabeth said, was important in the last election, and it's going to be important in this one as well. I made that a cornerstone issue in my campaign in 2018. And I have made it a cornerstone issue in 2020 as well. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't say that the negative, polarizing tone of politics is highly upsetting to my community. We have a beautifully diverse group of individuals here, some of whom are feeling very uncomfortable at the way our national and state and even local rhetoric has become so inflammatory. So we need to lead with integrity, lead with honesty, and make sure that we use our platforms to inform and engage our constituents, and not to play in the games of petty and polarizing politics. So I'm looking forward to being that kind of representative for House District 66. And you can read more about me on my website, SharonForTexas.com. It's Sharon4TX.com. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sharon. And last but certainly not least in my heart, Akilah Basie.
Well, hi, thank you guys so much. So I have had the opportunity to talk to you a lot about House District 138. It is an extremely diverse suburban area here in Houston, Texas. It is home to about 55% minorities. And one of the big issues that we see in this district is going to be education, and it's also flooding. Those are 2 major ones, and also healthcare. When we're looking at education, we are home to 35,000 students, and in our local district, 57% of those students are considered disadvantaged. However, when we're looking at issues like recapture, we are considered a rich district, and there's funding that is taken from our district. That's something that we have got to work on, reforming recapture, reforming school funding, to make sure that we are that every student in Texas is graduating with the same level of education, with the same level of knowledge. And so that requires that we have proper funding, and that means equitable funding. Also, we're looking at flood control. We know that there have been a lot of local projects that have been involved, but it's going to take more than just local projects. It's going to take state work. It's going to take more than just a reservoir. It's going to take work from the state to make sure that we're partnering with the architects, that we're having certain guidelines that are built up to withstand the next flood that will come. It means that we're going to have to make sure that our insurance companies are held accountable to pay out those funds and those and the resources that are needed when people make a claim after they have those insurance. And that's stuff that we handle and we regulate at the state house level. And we also have to look at healthcare. House District 138 is home to the zip code that holds, so that it's home to one of the highest rates of COVID-19 cases. And so what that tells us that we need to make sure that we are fighting to make sure that everyone has access to testing as they need it, that they're having access to healthcare as they need it, and that they are not so concerned with the bill that they are not making sure that they're taking care of themselves and their family and their community as well. And I've looked at when I've gone through doors before the pandemic in the primary and talking to people. One thing I learned is that while our parties might differ, our values a lot of times, when you get down to the bare bones, are the same. And that's what we want to say. We want safe communities. We want good schools, and we need somebody who's going to go into the state house and listen to the voice of the community. And that includes all of our voices, and who's going to fight for all of it.
Well, ladies, y'all have done a great job of answering our questions, the ones that Carly and I have for y'all. Now it's time for the audience. It's your turn. So remember, go to Facebook or YouTube or Twitter, look up Blue Outpost TX. Blue Outpost TX. Ask your questions there. We have several already lined up. So I'll ask the first one. And Sharon, I think you're up first. The way that we normally do these audience questions is we only give you 30 seconds to answer these for the next half hour. And it's because we want to try to get as many of them in as possible. So Sharon, and for those of you from out of the state, you might be a little appalled at this next piece of information. There is a law that is known as the No Promo Homo law. And in schools, the way it works is if you talk about LGBTQIA issues, you also have to talk about the idea that there's risky behavior included in those decisions. What are your thoughts on that, Sharon? I don't know if you've ever heard of that specific law, but what are your thoughts upon hearing that?
Yeah, I have not heard of that law, and I did not come across anything like that when I was working in our public schools. I think the campuses I worked on, there was a sensitivity to our students and a respect for our students. And I don't agree with it. And I know there's work to be done in that area. And statewide, I know we need to pass a comprehensive non-discrimination law, and I will be definitely on board with that.
Akilah?
I agree with what Sharon said. First off, I was completely unaware that that was a rule in schools. Of course, I am appalled to hear that. And I think that we need to make sure that we are, treating our LGBT community as a protected class. And that includes how we teach our children about people who are members of that community as well. Because what we teach students at their age is to take what we do as adults in our community, and that determines a lot of issues that we're going to see and that we do see. So I think that is extremely important as well.
Elizabeth?
Let's talk about how we need to have medically accurate and safe sex education in Texas schools, right? So we need to be talking about risky behavior, whether it is within the LGBTQ community or not, right? Like, we need to make sure that we are educating our children and giving them that that information that they need to be safe and healthy in this world, because there is no difference in sexual activity, whether it's an LGBTQ person or a straight student, right? So that's really the issue, is that we need to stop this partisan politics and educate our children in a way that they can, go forth and be safe and healthy in the community.
Thank you. Okay, our next question, we will start with Akilah. Texas has left a lot to be desired with the state response to COVID-19. What would you work to put in place at a state level to respond to the next pandemic? I can't believe I'm even saying those words.
The next pandemic. Hopefully the next pandemic. That's where we're going to start there. What would I put into place? Well, I think that we need to make sure that we are listening to the scientists and the doctors as well. So that would go what we see now. I could go retroactively. It would be to make sure that we are closing down all businesses until the scientists and the doctors tell us it is safe to open up our schools and our businesses as well. Because what we know is that when only some of us are doing the right thing, all of us might as well not be doing the right thing. So I think that we need to make sure that we have holistic laws and regulations where we're listening to our doctors and our experts.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
We need to make sure that, one, we have leaders that will lead. Right. And so that's, in the control of the people who we elect to lead us through the next pandemic. And then what we can do this next session is make sure that we are creating the mechanisms or putting them in place to make sure that we have a solid plan for the state of Texas for the next time that a massive emergency hits, whether that's a health crisis or a humanitarian crisis, that all of our agencies have a plan in place that we know how we're going to communicate and coordinate amongst the state and up and down, from the state level to federal and our local leaders.
Thank you, Sharon.
Yeah, definitely science-based decision making, and then I think leadership in a time of a crisis, demands clear and trustworthy communication. It asks leaders to act boldly and decisively, and then they need to be responsible for the decisions that they make. And I think that's what was lacking. Nobody maybe knew the absolutely 100% correct way to respond to COVID-19, but the way we responded on both the national and the state levels was definitely not where we needed to be. But to be honest to the public is critical.
I can't believe that's even a thing. Trust scientists and be honest. The bar has seemed to come so low. Jaime.
And, I know it's hard to answer these questions in 30 seconds or less, but we do have several questions. And audience members, keep those questions coming. Elizabeth, where do you stand on cannabis? All of it. Tell us where you go with that.
So I think that we need to make sure that physicians have every available tool in their medicine bag to treat patients here in Texas. Every state that Texas has access to medical marijuana, and we need to look at why Texans don't have access. And I think that, creating a retail market for marijuana is definitely something that's on the table to create a revenue stream in this next legislative session. And it's a criminal justice reform issue. We will save $750 million a year by decriminalizing low-level marijuana charges in the prosecution, policing, and incarceration of those folks.
Sharon, where do you stand on that issue?
Yes to everything Elizabeth said. Expanded use of medicinal marijuana, legalizing recreational marijuana, and also let's keep these people out of the criminal justice system. It's costing us money, and it's costing people their lives and their livelihood.
And Akilah.
I'm going to have to echo what Elizabeth said. I think that she really just hit the nail on the head, and especially coming from a criminal justice reform aspect. I think when we decriminalize marijuana, we give so many citizens and community members their lives back as well. So I think it is extremely that we decriminalize marijuana.
Thank you all. And that takes us to our next audience question, which is kind of, all these questions come in, they're all in the same vein. This one is, Texas really likes their for-profit prison system. What are your thoughts on the for-profit prison system, and what would you propose as a remedy? So Sharon, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, it's inherently wrong that we profit on putting people in prison. It just needs to stop. Our criminal justice system should be focused on rehabilitation of individuals and bringing families back together, not creating a for-profit system for anybody.
Thank you, Akilah.
I agree. I think when we're looking at for-profit prisons, that means prosecution and policing then become a business, and that is not what they're in place to do. They're in place to make sure that justice is done and our communities are kept safe. And so I absolutely think that we need to remove the idea of for-profit prisons. You should not be profiting, and that's just, I mean, going to a philosophical issue off of someone else's pain in that regard. So that is just literally where I stand on that.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
You know, in Texas, we have created the prison industrial complex, and it is time that we wipe that off the books, that we really focus on that rehabilitation and getting folks, one, keeping them out of the prison system, so that we don't need those places of incarceration. So we got to keep them out, and then focus on rehabilitating them and getting them back home so that they can be productive members of the community.
Thank you.
So, Akilah, the audience wants to take us back to healthcare for a second. They want to know about the maternal morbidity rate in Texas and what can we do to solve that declining problem?
Oh, wow. That is a loaded question. I am not sure, honestly, to be completely honest, about how we work on that. But I do know that it is an issue that we need to fully address. I know that Representative Thiry has done tons of amazing work on that. But I do think that it does come down into making sure that doctors are, getting that training that they need, that bias training that we see oftentimes that is talked about, and also that all services are documented, refusals to provide services are documented as well in patient notes.
Elizabeth?
Expand access to Medicaid in Texas, and that includes, a year postpartum of Medicaid coverage to Texas mothers, because our mortality rate is incredibly too high, and every Texan deserves to have a mother. And we know that access to healthcare postpartum is one of the most effective ways to address that issue.
Sharon?
Yeah, pregnant women that access Medicaid typically don't get on their health care till at least midway through the pregnancy, because they have to be pregnant, know they're pregnant before they can even apply. So we've made the process very onerous, and we need to streamline that. True that the healthcare needs to be expanded to 1 year postpartum, and expanded medical care overall, because the issues that cause these women to die are, blood pressure and things that could be dealt with if people had regular health care.
And I just want to jump in on this one for a quick second, which is to remind you all that healthcare clinics across the state have been closed because of the issue of abortion. And Planned Parenthood has been blocked from helping on this issue quite a bit. Just 2 seconds to respond to that. Akilah?
Respond to what?
The idea that Planned Parenthood is important. These clinics all around the state.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the question. No, absolutely right. I'm proud to be endorsed by Planned Parenthood. I, believe that the services they provide to women, young women, is extremely important. They provide basic health care that I've used at points in times in my life when I did not have access to insurance. And so I think that it's extremely necessary that we fully fund Planned Parenthood and the services they provide to women, and including women like me.
Elizabeth?
So I have the honor of serving on the Planned Parenthood of Greater Texas Fort Worth Community Board, and I've been able to see the amazing work that this organization does for men and women across this state. And I want to say that again, women and men, because there are both are patients of Planned Parenthood. But we have got to make sure that we keep those doors open, because they offer a safe environment for medically accurate care for all Texans, whether it be reproductive reproductive health care, or they've expanded the ability of what they can do to offer some more routine health care as well. And I think that we have to make sure that they are able to serve the Texans that need them.
And Sharon?
Yeah, we need to stop the fight against Planned Parenthood and clinics like them who for a long time have provided much needed medical care to communities, to men and women. They know what they're doing. And I think when we elect all these fabulous women to the Texas House, we'll have a much greater opportunity to do that and make sure our communities have the services that they need.
I'm counting on you ladies. I really am. I really, really, really am. Elizabeth, and I just want to interject myself because I'm on the board of a Democratic women's group, and we are committed to electing pro-choice Democrat candidates citywide, statewide, countywide, all the wides. And you're saying every Texan deserves a mother. Like that's it. That's really it. That's it. Every Texan deserves a mother. We should not make one child be without their mom. So thank you for that, ladies, all of you. Now we will move on to the next one. This is a not so heart-pulling. What's your strategy for working on bipartisan legislation? Elizabeth, we'll start with you.
I've talked about my time in the military, and if that taught me one thing, it's how to live, work, and even love people that don't think, look, or act like you. And so that is something that I plan to take with me when I'm down in Austin. Things will be a little easier because we will flip the Texas House, and so Democrats will be in the majority. But that doesn't mean that we get to steamroll through the House. We're gonna have to work with our Republican partners, and I think we can all find common ground if we focus on the values at the core of the decisions that we're making for Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Sharon.
Yeah, I'm a mom of 4 and I worked in public schools for a long time. So I know what it means to compromise. I think the very best legislation, the very best things that we can do are bipartisan. When we have these big swings in the pendulum, we hurt people. When we go too far one way or the other, we hurt people. When those rules and regulations are unraveled, when the next core of people come in. So I think the very best thing we can do is reach across the aisle.
Thank you. Akilah?
I think that it's extremely important, one, that we first off understand that while we are all running as proud Democrats, we are running to represent our entire districts and not lose sight of that first off. And then make sure that we are going there to be a voice for every member of our district, and we're fighting for the values within our districts. And when you get down to the nitty gritty of it, one thing that I have seen, even at the polls, talking to Republicans and Democrats, is that our values, we all want to fight for the same things. When we get rid of the talking points and the little sayings that are the polarizing sayings, we want the same things. And so that's one thing we have to make sure that we're getting down there and we're getting to the root of the issue, and we're finding an answer that we can all live with and that we all want to see happen.
So Sharon, this, for the audience members that are not from Texas, this might be a little shocking. The state legislature actually only meets one time after you get elected, and then you have to run for office again. And that one time is for about 120 days, for about 4 months. So in January to May, you'll be a legislator actually working on laws. But then after that, you basically become a candidate again. And for the next year and a half, you're running to have that office again. A lot of states don't work that way. A lot of states have legislators that are 12 months out of the year, legislators for the whole 2-year cycle. What is up with Texas, and what do you think about the way Texas runs the system?
Well, this was a system that was developed a long time ago. Texas is a big state. It took you talked about it early on, how many miles it is from one place to another. So it took legislators, a long time to get to Austin, right? And they believed in limited government. It's not as efficient now. I don't believe our session will be just 140 days. I feel quite confident that we'll go into special session, and the governor has the prerogative to call as many 30-day sessions as need be. I do know that work goes on outside of the 140 days. I will say about the campaigning nonstop, it's ridiculous. And I don't know what we have to do to make it stop, but it needs to stop because too much time and too much money is spent on campaigning.
Akilah?
Well, this might be a surprise to some, but I don't plan on being a candidate after session. I plan on still being a community servant until it is time and reelection comes around again. And so that is going to be my focus. There is still work to be done on the ground with constituency services once session ends in House District 138, and I plan on continuing to be a public servant even to my community after session is over.
And Elizabeth?
I think it's important we look at our system and determine if it still works for Texas. And I think that we've seen, what the need for the legislator to meet and address some very serious issues, what that looks like, when COVID-19 hit. So I think that we need to look at, what still serves Texas and does this still serve Texas? But I think it's important that we keep two things in mind. The part-time legislator allows us to be back in our districts and really know the people and work in those districts so that we can carry their voice to Austin. However, that same part-time legislator prevents a wide variety and a diversity of voices in the legislature because there are only certain types of people and professions that have the luxury of being able to go down to Austin, for those 140 days every 2 years.
Thank you so much. Those are all great answers. Our next question from the audience is, what do we do about food deserts? Akila, we'll start with you.
Well, you know what I think we could do? We get to incentivize businesses in those areas. I think that's the first thing that we have to look at is incentivize people to go and have those businesses put in the areas. We need to look at making sure that we are taking care of those communities where that remains an issue by putting our funding into that area.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
Addressing food deserts is really a local issue, but we have to make sure at the state level that we are providing the support that the communities need to make sure that the economic development that is required, that creates those food deserts, right? That blight that creates the food deserts, that we are creating programs and incentives that the local communities can use to address to remedy the food desert issue.
Thank you. And Sharon?
Yeah, I think it's caught up. It's complicated. It's caught up in the housing and economic issues of the community as well. I've seen some creative solutions in some cities with bus type grocery stores that basically drove into the communities. I've seen economic incentives. And then I'm also a big fan of the community school model in education where you incorporate some more social services and community-based services in schools in neighborhoods like this so you can give people the resources that they need to be healthy and happy families.
Thank you. Don't forget $17 to each of these candidates. Give an hour of your time. Give 17 minutes of your time. I don't care. Just do something for these ladies so we get them to the Texas State House. I am so excited. Jaime, you have the next question up.
Yeah, and remember that 17 is significant. These are 17 state house races that were within 10 points of winning in the last election cycle. And so they are all within the statistical error of margin on any given Tuesday to win this race. Akila was actually in her district was only a few votes away. I mean, what was it, 47 votes, 48 votes?
Yeah, Adam Millicent was a Democratic nominee in 2018, and he got us 47 votes from flipping.
So, I mean, these races are close. If you are listening from out of the state and you want to help, Texas can flip this year. That $17 that's going to these candidates is a huge impact. And just that number 17, keep that in your mind on election night, because we need 9 of these seats to win to flip the House back and realize that Texas has been blue all this time. And people just didn't realize that gerrymandering has been the problem. It's not that there aren't enough Democrats. It's that the Republicans that were there were able to gerrymander back in 2003, the state to their advantage. And so just remember that gerrymandering is coming up in this next legislative session. And that's actually the audience question. What are you thinking about gerrymandering, which is also known professionally as redistricting? And I think, Akila, you're up next.
All right. Well, I think what we need to make sure we're doing is we're getting an independent committee to look and make sure that they're drawing their fair lines. We know that this is the decade or the election of a decade, because that's going to determine whether or not all Texans' voices are heard or they're going to be drawn out of lines again. And we are not going to have any political power for the next 10 years as well. We also know that Texas is set to gain some more congressional seats. How are those lines going to be drawn that also not only affect us locally, but federally as well? So what happens in the Texas House is a national issue at this point, and we have to treat it as such.
Elizabeth?
You know, I tell people that this is a local race with national implications because of gerrymandering. And we have to make sure that Texans have the opportunity to elect a person that best represents the values of their community. And gerrymandering takes that ability away from Texans. And so I think it is going to be so important in this next session that we draw fair maps, so that the people that Texans are electing to the state house, the state senate, the U.S. House, represent them and their values and can take those forward.
Thanks, Sharon.
Yeah, I'm committed to a fair maps process. I do believe in the independent commission process as well, but it's too late for this cycle, so that we won't be able to have that. But I want people to know that if the legislature doesn't draw the lines or can't agree on the lines, it goes to a 5-member legislative redistricting committee. And that committee is made up of 5 office holders right now who are currently all Republicans. That is a closed door process. It is not a transparent process. So the only way we have to have a seat at the table is to flip the Texas House and elect a Democratic speaker. And that speaker would be part of that 5-member committee.
So at this point, Carly, if you want to begin the wrap-up sequence for us.
Well, we've run out of time for our audience questions. And ladies, there are tons of great questions in the comments. So I really do highly suggest you all go and answer those questions for your voters so they can see all the wonderful solutions that you have. We want to thank you all for being here. Today has been incredibly inspiring for, I hope, all of our viewers, certainly for myself. I want to give each of you a minute to kind of do your wrap up, and then we will be done. And we will start, we're going to go in reverse in numerical order. So Sharon, we'll start with you, House District 66.
All right. Thanks so much for the opportunity to be here tonight. I'm Sharon Hirsch. I am the Democratic nominee for Texas House District 66. We know this is a very flippable race, coming 391 votes to flipping it last cycle. We are building on the progress that we made. We are harnessing all the great energy that we see in our community, and we are looking forward to delivering new leadership to House District 66 in Collin County and the state in November. We can still use your help. I invite you to go to my website, SharonForTexas.com. You can read up on issues, you can volunteer, you can donate. I'd love to have you on board. This is the most consequential election of our lifetimes. Please participate, get all your friends and neighbors to participate. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much. Elizabeth Beck for House District 97.
Thank you so much for inviting me out and giving me the opportunity tonight to answer some people's questions. On November 3rd, the people of House District 97 will have the opportunity to send a true leader to Austin, a leader that is willing to get out in front and confront the very tough issues facing our state today, one that is going to work for them and not the other way around. And so I am asking you all to support our campaign and go to ElizabethForTexas.com. You can make a donation. You can sign up to volunteer. And if you live in the district, I certainly hope that I can count on you for your support so that we can, I have the opportunity to get down there and work with Sharon and Akilah and make things better for Texans.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And last, but first in my heart, because she's a local girl, Miss Akilah Basie, HD 138.
Well, hi, guys. Thank you guys so much for sticking out with us tonight. My name is Akilah Basie. I'm running for Texas House District 138. And one thing that I think is extremely important when we're looking at our legislature is going to be who's done the work and who's been committed to the work on the ground before they had a title before their name, before the public was looking. And you know what? I've been committed to this district. I've been committed to the work for our community and our state from the very beginning of my profession. My entire professional calling has been called here, and so much of my personal calling and then volunteer work has been called to doing the work for our community and our individuals in our community, the vulnerable in our community, the disenfranchised in our community, and that'll be no different. House District 138 was decided by 47 votes in 2018. 47 votes, less than 1 point. And so we need to make sure when we see now, though, is that we're getting out and talking to people. We are winning. We're winning across all demographics. We're winning across this district. But that doesn't mean anything when we're asking questions and on the phone. We do not get out and vote. And how do we get out and vote? We get out and vote by getting people energized, and that's by volunteering. You can go to our website at AkilahBasey.com, and you can see and you can sign up to volunteer with us. We have lots of phone banks going right now, lip drops going as well. And if you're not able to volunteer, please go to our website, and also you can donate. Every bit helps, every amount helps. So please help us take this seat. We've got to get 47 more votes to get some true change and representation in 138. Thank you.
So good.
Candidates, thank you all for your time. Also, we know that right now we're just a month away from early voting starting, so every hour is precious to your campaigns. We appreciate it. People all over America, thank you for watching tonight. Again, we are doing this series every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday night at 7 p.m. Central Time. And join us to meet more wonderful candidates Tuesday night. And Carly, I'll give you the last word.
Send these women to Austin. I want to say people don't understand that Texas really shapes a lot of people's education throughout our nation because of our school boards and our textbooks and all that. So we need to make sure that we are truly the example for America, and these women are clearly the leaders for us. So please donate your time, donate your money. Akilah, Elizabeth, Sharon, thank you so much. I cannot wait to say state representative the next time that I see you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you so much.